Make sure. So. Well, hello and welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you could join me this morning for today's program, 1825, A Year of Changes, the Village of Syracuse and its ties to the Erie Canal. My name is Kate Kisselstein, and I'm one of the local history and genealogy librarians here at Onondaga County Public Library Central Library in downtown Syracuse, just a few blocks away from the Erie Canal Museum. I'm thrilled to share this special bicentennial themed program with you today. Just a quick bit of housekeeping before we dive in. Today's session is being recorded, so I'm going to ask that you please make sure your microphones are muted. Let's see. There we go. During the presentation. There will be time for questions and discussion at the end, and I'd love to hear your thoughts then. The map you see here is a view of Syracuse from 1834, just a few years after the village's incorporation. It's from the Library of Congress Geography and Map Division and offers a glimpse of how things were taking shape just as Syracuse was coming into its own. Before we dive into the swamps, salt, and civic changes of 1825, I'd like to give you a quick roadmap for where we're headed today. We'll start by exploring the unlikely rise of Syracuse from a mosquito-ridden patch of swamp to a chartered village, and then follow how the opening of the Erie Canal just months later helped fuel the village's early growth. I'll introduce some of the key figures, rival communities, and turning points in this transformation. Then, toward the end, I'll share some research strategies for tracing ancestors in central New York before 1850, when records can be tricky, but clues do exist, especially around land, churches, and communities tied to the canal system. The two images you see here help set the scene. One shows the canal as a vital transportation route, the other a vivid view of the salt industry that made Syracuse famous. These two forces, salt and the canal, shaped what came next. This 1814 engraving shows Onondaga Hollow, one of the well-established communities in the region at the time. If you look closely, you'll see a cluster of buildings nestled among the hills, with a lone figure surveying the scene. We don't know who he is, maybe a landholder, maybe just a settler. But what's notable is what's not here. No canal, no trains, no city. Syracuse, just a few miles away, was still an unpromising, swampy stretch of land. No one would have guessed then that it would become the beating heart of the Salt City and eventually a key Erie Canal hub. While neighboring communities were thriving, the area that would become Syracuse was often described as a low, swampy tract. It was an expanse of standing water, bramble, and clay-soaked earth, not exactly the kind of place that drew in eager settlers. It was home to salt vats and stagnant pools. Mosquitoes were abundant, and so was disease. The land was difficult to drain, with very few trees cleared and little in the way of infrastructure. And yet, it had one undeniable advantage: location. Proximity to the salt springs and its central position in the state made it a candidate for development once the Erie Canal arrived to reshape everything. As Syracuse's future began to take shape, much of it centered around a piece of land known as the Walton Tract, first surveyed in 1804 by James Geddes. This tract would become the foundation of downtown Syracuse. In 1819, Joshua Foreman, one of the region's earliest champions, bought a large portion of the tract and began laying out lots for a village grid. The layout we see reflected on this 1838 map is the result of those early efforts. You'll notice how carefully it's structured. The streets form neat blocks. The Erie and Oswego canals are in place, and the distinction between Syracuse and Salina is still prominent. But in the 1820s, these plans were more hopeful than certain. The area was still sparsely settled. It would take the Erie Canal's opening in 1825 to turn these carefully plotted grids into a thriving commercial center. Before Syracuse had its name, it cycled through a number of contenders. Milan, Corinth, and Salina were all suggested at different times, and Cossett's Corners was a common nickname for the busy intersection of Genesee and Salina streets. But it was Joshua Foreman, seen here, who proposed the name Syracuse in 1820. He was inspired by the ancient city in Sicily, which, like this region, sat near salt springs and was known for trade. Foreman's choice gave the village a name with classical weight and forward momentum, and it eventually stuck, despite some early resistance. His vision for the area extended beyond just names. He was also one of the earliest and most vocal proponents for the Erie Canal. After years of muddy streets, scattered salt works, and informal growth, Syracuse was officially incorporated as a village on April 13, 1825. The bill passed both houses of the New York State Legislature, and yet you wouldn't know it was a big deal from how it was covered. As you can see here in the Syracuse Gazette, it was mentioned almost in passing, sandwiched between news about canal delays and banking bills. This quiet tone fits the moment. Syracuse was still emerging, still viewed by many as a peripheral location, but this incorporation laid the groundwork for structured governance and municipal investment, including roads, lighting, sanitation, and local ordinances. It was a humble beginning for what would become one of the most prominent cities in central New York. Just a few weeks after incorporation, Syracuse held its first village election on May 3, 1825. Joshua Foreman, whose influence helped shape the name and vision of Syracuse, was elected as president of the Board of Trustees, essentially the village's first mayoral figure. Other trustees elected were Amos Granger, Moses D. Burnett, Herman Walbridge, and John Rogers, with John Wilkinson as clerk and John Durnford as treasurer. Their first meeting, held on May 4th, was all business. In fact, some of the ordinances passed in the following days give us a surprisingly vivid picture of what mattered to this young, muddy village. Within days of that first meeting, the new trustees rolled up their sleeves and got to work. Among their earliest ordinances, bans on pigs running at large, prohibitions on leaving lumber and goods in the canal path, and even rules about noise and boisterous behavior. They also began issuing tavern and grocer licenses with a higher fee if you intended to sell alcohol. A handful of names come up repeatedly: Casson and Heermans, Joseph Thompson, Hayden Rice, showing showing how important taverns were to the social and economic life of the village. These ordinances weren't just about public order. They were also an effort to generate early revenue and assert control over the rapidly growing population. Even in 1825, Syracuse was learning how to govern itself. Just months after Syracuse became a village, the Erie Canal officially opened on October 26, 1825. Nicknamed the Great Ditch, or Clinton's Ditch, the canal stretched 363 miles from Albany to Buffalo and right through the heart of central New York. For Syracuse, this was transformational. The village had been a sleepy patch of swamp, but now it was a midpoint on one of the busiest transportation routes in the country. Goods, people, and information could now move faster and farther than ever before. Travel time dropped, shipping costs plummeted, and Syracuse, it was no longer just a salt-producing backwater. It was suddenly connected, and that changed everything. The canal didn't just move people, it moved salt. And in Syracuse, salt was everything. Syracuse's salt springs had long been a local resource, but the Erie Canal gave producers access to statewide and even national markets. Brine from the salt beds was processed and loaded onto canal boats, and from there it went east to Albany or west to Buffalo and far beyond. This dramatically changed the economy. Syracuse was no longer just producing salt for nearby communities. It became the key supplier for the growing Northeast and Midwest. The impact was explosive. Population growth, road construction, warehouses, and canal-side businesses all sprang up. The stereograph image on screen shows solar salt workers later in the 19th century. By then, the process had scaled up and become a major industrial operation, but its roots lie right here in the 1820s. In the early 1820s, Syracuse wasn't the obvious choice for success, at least not according to its neighbors. Salina, just to the north, had the salt industry and a well-established population. Many in Salina dismissed Syracuse as nothing more than a mosquito-infested swamp, useful for transport, maybe, but hardly a rival. To the south, Onondaga Valley, which had been Onondaga Hollow, had long been the political and civic center of the region. It had the courthouse, the schools, and the power base. But Syracuse had one thing they didn't: location. With the Erie Canal cutting straight through it, and with early promoters like Joshua Foreman and John Wilkinson pushing for infrastructure and incorporation, Syracuse slowly began to outpace its neighbors. Businesses followed the boats. Travelers preferred the flatter terrain, and as Syracuse grew, tensions mounted. Over the next 2 decades, those tensions would lead to annexations, political maneuvering, and, eventually, the formation of a city in 1847. We've mentioned their names along the way, but now let's take a moment to spotlight 3 men who helped define early Syracuse. Joshua Foreman was more than just the village's first board president. He was a visionary, one of the earliest proponents of a cross-state canal, and the man who suggested the name Syracuse, inspired by the salt-rich city in Sicily. John Wilkinson was a jack of all trades. He served as the first postmaster, helped lay out the village's streets, and worked tirelessly to promote civic order and growth. He even played a key role in securing canal access. Oliver Teal, meanwhile, saw the potential in water power. He built mills and developed the village's first waterworks, using water from the canal to drive early industry. Together, these 3 helped push Syracuse from a concept to a community, each using their own strengths to build a foundation for what would follow. In 1824 and 1825, the United States welcomed back General Lafayette, the beloved French hero of the American Revolution, for a triumphant farewell tour. His journey was part celebration, part diplomatic gesture, and part national reunion. Wherever he went, cities and villages pulled out the stops to honor him. On June 9th and 10th, 1825, Lafayette visited Salina and Syracuse. He was received with processions, speeches, and ceremonies, all planned with pride by communities that were still emerging. Syracuse, just incorporated that April, was still a very young village, but Lafayette's visit was a sign that it was earning its place on the map. For residents, it was a thrilling moment of connection to the broader sweep of American history. After the Erie Canal opened and Syracuse officially became a village, things began to move quickly. The village had a planned street grid, thanks in part to John Wilkinson's early efforts. This gave it an edge as it grew. The structure was already in place for businesses, neighborhoods, and public buildings. Schools and churches were established almost immediately. As more people arrived, drawn by jobs, trade, and salt, stores, hotels, and service trades popped up to meet their needs. And by the 1830s and 1840s, new technologies like steam power and railroads began to complement canal transportation. These innovations pushed Syracuse further into its role as a key commercial center in the region. What started as a swampy grid on paper was rapidly becoming a living, breathing city. Now we transition to the genealogy portion of today's presentation. And when it comes to genealogy, anything before 1850 gets trickier, especially if you're relying on federal records. The 1850 census was the first to list every household member by name. Before that, federal censuses only listed heads of household and gave tick marks for everyone else. Not very helpful on its own. So how do we get around that? We look locally. Land records, tax rolls, church membership lists, baptism registers, cemetery inscriptions, and wills. These are the bread and butter of pre-1850s research. And don't just look for your ancestor by name. Look for neighbors, witnesses, and associates. Who's showing up on the same deed? Who's buried nearby? Who got baptized by the same minister? These are the clues that help build a case when records are sparse. Context becomes your best friend. Once we leave the world of the census schedules, we rely more on local and state records and on paying attention to the people around our ancestors. Land records are among the most valuable. Deeds, leases, mortgages, and grants, land grants, can reveal not only where someone lived, but who they were dealing with, and sometimes even a wife's name. Church records are critical, especially for this era. Baptisms, marriages, membership rolls, burials, these often predate civil vital records, especially here in New York State. Then there are tax lists, estate files, and probate records. These give us context. Who had land? Who paid taxes? Who was named in a will or left out of one? And one of the best strategies is using what genealogist Elizabeth Shown Mills called the fan club, friends, associates, and neighbors. When you can't find your person, look at who surrounded them. Community networks often leave footprints where individuals do not. One of the most common canal-related questions I get is, I know my ancestor worked on the Erie Canal. How do I go about finding him? The truth is, many canal workers, Irish immigrants and other nationalities, and laborers from this period left few traditional records behind. They were often hired seasonally, moving from place to place, and didn't own land or show up in tax assessments. Payrolls and employment rosters weren't always preserved, and when they were, names might only appear as first initials or grouped as crew. But they were here. They left traces. We just have to look sideways, through people they worked with, where they boarded, what church they attended, and sometimes who they were buried beside. Here are some specific tools that can help you trace canal workers. The New York State Archives has contracts and progress reports from canal contractors. Now, while most don't list individual laborers, they sometimes reference foremen, timelines, and worksite locations. Some lock tenders and canal overseers kept logbooks or journals. These are scattered in local historical societies and canal museums. Church records, especially from Catholic parishes, are crucial for identifying Irish immigrant laborers. Look for marriages, baptisms, and burial registers. Use canal towns as your anchors, places like Syracuse, Rome, Utica, and Lockport. Then check census records, city directories, and newspapers for any mention of canal crews, accidents, or events. It may not be easy, but with a careful web of sources and patience, even the most elusive laborer can leave a trail. I want to take a moment here to pause and be realistic. We've talked a lot about strategies, and they do work. But in truth, success stories about individual canal workers are rare, especially for those who weren't landowners, foremen, or otherwise documented in official reports. When those stories do exist, they tend to involve contractors, lock keepers, or people tied to church or boarding houses. Many researchers find themselves in a gray area where someone is listed as a laborer in 1825 Syracuse, living near the canal, showing up in Catholic baptismal records, but never labeled outright as a canal worker. That said, with persistence, contextual clues, and a little detective work, you may still be able to build a solid, probable case, even without that one perfect record. Whether you're just getting started or are deeply into long-term family mystery, you don't have to go it alone. The local history and genealogy department here at Onondaga County Public Library's Central Library is here to help, and that includes me and the head of the department, Dan Smith. Whether it's digging into land records, tracking down church registers, or navigating digital databases, this is what we love to do. Don't forget the Erie Canal Museum, especially for context, community information, and canal era exhibits. The New York State Archives, New York Heritage, and regional libraries are gold mines, as are local churches, cemeteries, and public historians. And truly, if you're stuck, ask a librarian. You might not find your ancestor right away, but together we will find a way forward. Before we open things up for questions, let's take a quick moment to review what we covered today. We looked at Syracuse in 1825, its humble beginnings, rapid changes, and the people who helped shape it. We saw how the Erie Canal transformed the village into a hub of trade and population. On the genealogy side, we talked about strategies for pre-1850s research, especially when traditional records fall short. And we gave special attention to researching canal workers, even when documentation is sparse. Most importantly, I hope you walk away feeling more confident in how to start, where to look, and who can help you keep going. I'd love to open the floor to any questions, thoughts, or stories you'd like to share. If you have a family connection to the canal, early Syracuse, or any part of what we talked about today, I'd love to hear it. And if you'd prefer to reach out privately, I'm always happy to chat via email later.
Hi, Kate. This is Gina Odell. Just
Yes.
a little interesting story when you mentioned the Wilkinson fellow. My mother and her 2-year older sister Jenny worked back in the early 40s when they were in their, almost mid 20s. They worked for the Wilkinson family that lived in one of the now long gone mansions on James Street. So I'm assuming that those Wilkinsons were related to the Wilkinson, in the early development of Syracuse.
Oh.
And they had my aunt Jenny was the cook at the time, and my mom was, as she described, the upstairs maid. And she said the family was really lovely. And a humorous story is early on when my Aunt Jenny was the cook, Mrs. Wilkinson, the older matriarch of the family then, they would have dinner and Aunt Jenny would make nice rolls. She was a wonderful cook. And Mrs. Wilkinson's plate always came back with the center of the rolls pulled out. And Aunt Jenny thought, oh my God, she hates my cooking. She's too nice to say anything. So Aunt Jenny contacted the previous cook who got a good laugh and said, Mrs. Wilkinson likes the chewy outside of rolls. So you know what my Aunt Jenny did? She made popovers from that time on, and Mrs. Wilkinson was happy.
Oh, how cute.
Yeah, I thought it was a very fun story, but my mom said they were very nice. They had Sundays off, and she and Aunt Jenny would, visit the different stores, go to a soda fountain. There used to be down on the corner of South Salina and James Street, there was a movie theater and roller skating rink,
Oh,
and
yes.
they'd go roller skating. So it was, they had a very nice time while they worked there before
Oh,
they were both married.
oh, wow. Oh, how wonderful. Yes.
And where the house was is now a parking lot. I did some
Oh,
research online and it's too
yeah.
bad.
Yes. Yes, it is. Yes. Oh, I should stop sharing so we can see each other. Um, Let me do speak. All right. And I see we have a couple. in the chat. Oh, Monique, yes, there will be a recording available this weekend. Um, so, and I'll be sending out an email with that along with the handout. Um, yes. So does anybody else have anything they want to share or any questions?
Yeah, I got
Hey,
it. This is Dan, and my father used to talk about the canal when crossed Erie Boulevard, going up across Salina Street. Apparently, there used to be like a bridge there that they could open and close so that the larger boats could get through, or canal boats could get through. And I used to go jumping off of that bridge, and after finding out that the place was really like a sewage pot, we used to question my father on the reality of what he was saying. But another thing was that on Erie Boulevard, it's now a Bank of America building there. The first drive-up window in banking in Syracuse was at that bank. I forget the name of the bank at the time. Right now, it's Bank of America. But right at the back side of the building, where the parking lot is, there was a window there, and it was used by the canal boat captains to do their banking.
Oh,
So, I mean, and I found that information out because I used to work at M&T Bank. I was the information technology officer for the bank, but that kind of stuff just kind of interested me, and I would find information like that, and it just it was crazy and surprising to see.
oh wow, neat.
And so just a couple of tidbits to throw out there.
Yeah.
Kate, this is Jan Murray. I was reminded of a boat trip that my husband and I took when he retired. I think it was back in 2016.
Mhm.
That summer, we decided to take our boat out of the marina at Onondaga Lake Park. And our daughter at the time was living in Burlington, Vermont. So we did the canal all the way over to the Hudson River and then went north. And then there was a separate canal that we took that got us up into Lake Champlain. And then we were able to dock our boat in Burlington, Vermont, and spend a little time during the summer with her. So it was a fun trip, but it surely made me appreciative of all the work and effort and engineering that went into the building of that canal.
Oh,
The locks were just amazing. I understand this summer that it's closed. Parts of it, the canal are closed because they're doing some long needed repairs, particularly over in the area, I think, of Little Falls.
yes, I believe I have heard something to that effect.
Yeah. I remember that lock scared the daylights out of me because it was, I forget now how many feet it dropped or rose, depending on which way you were coming.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and it was just very steep and very dark. And when the gates were closed, there was some water coming through, and that was kind of scary. And I think I don't think I was the only one that traveled the canal and kind of held their breath during that lock.
Oh, yeah. I
But
can
it was a
imagine.
nice memory.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Kate, my great great grandparents lived in Salina, and husband number one was a salt boiler, and
Oh,
I had to look that one up. And it's a salt boiler refers to the process of extracting salt from brine by boiling it. And anyways, and this was in the 1850s. And in 1863, he fell into the canal and drowned.
oh dear.
So I'm wondering maybe they had a little too much to drink that night. I don't know. It was, and there was a an inquiry, blah blah blah. And I did find probate records and whatever. And of course, back in the 1850, women were nothing. So, the court appointed someone else to be the guardian, or co-guardian with her of her children. Okay. Which
Wow.
I found kind of interesting. And I think they were also somebody's, I'm sure as a salt boiler, he didn't have a lot of money, but,
Right.
the court appointed somebody to oversee the estate, if you will.
Oh, wow.
Wasn't eligible, I guess, because she was a woman, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And a couple of months later, she gets married again,
Oh,
probably out of necessity. She had a couple, two, three kids, they had to get married probably.
true.
And he was a salt boiler. So my great great grandfather and my step great great grandfather were salt boilers. And
Huh.
I have found the marriage records for marriage number 2 at the Church of the Assumption in Syracuse, which was German church, still is around today. But I've never found the marriage record for marriage number 1, which was mid to late 1850s. And I'm wondering if you have any hints on where I might try to find that in Salina, probably. So,
Yeah. Salina records. Yeah. I think if I have some that's something I could work on. I could check some of the records we've got here.
okay. Do you
I
want me
know
to
you
send you an
probably,
email?
yeah, send me an email and
Okay.
I can do some checking because I
Okay.
owe
Because
you an email anyway.
yeah, I've checked a little bit around, church records, and, I just haven't come up with anything. So,
Yeah. But especially if it's dealing with I mean, Dan's not here today, but I can always pick his brain when I see him again on Tuesday. So
okay.
yeah, we've got a long weekend this weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
This is Jan Murray again. I'm just wondering, um, I spent a lot of time in the Tully area, in the Tully Valley area. And I know that that was part of the salt mining, but I don't know that much about it. Is there anyone on here that knows what role that area played in the salt mining?
I'll be honest, I'd have to do some more checking into that.
Okay, well, I can look into it too. It just as a thought that I had. I know just recently there was some land there that was donated back to the Native Americans, the Onondagas. Uh,
Mhm.
so that's a good thing. But I don't know that much about the salt mining in that area, but I know it was a big thing down in the valley just north of Tully.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Very neat. Very cool. All right. Is there anyone else with something to share? Um, I'll share my screen one more time for the last one. And I'm just going to say thank you all so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to share this moment in Syracuse's history with you. If you have any more questions that you didn't get to ask, or if you want help with your own research, please don't hesitate to reach out. And if you enjoyed today's session, we hope to see you for future programs. The next one we have coming up will be on Friday, June 13th. It's going to be Syracuse in Living Color, Public Art and Architecture of the Salt City. So that's a local history one. I'm still finalizing the June genealogy program, so stay tuned for that. And as And again, that I will be sending out a link to the recording that will be available later this weekend along with the handout. And I hope to see you all at the next program. So
Thank you, Kate.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That was a wonderful program. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Yes, thank you. Very interesting.
Oh, thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, everyone.
You too.
Thanks, Kate.
Yeah,
Same here. Everybody have a great weekend.
yeah,
Stay safe.
Warmer in Syracuse.
yeah. Take care.